everyone, a very good evening to you all. I'm Harleen, your host for today's session. I hope you've all had a great day and are now excited and ready for the brand new informative session of the Masterclass series organized by the Institute of Product Leadership. Before I start today's insightful session, let me give you a quick introduction to the Institute. The Institute of Product Leadership is Asia's first business school providing accredited degree programs and certification courses in product management, product leadership, data design, strategy, and leadership. The Institute has partnered with three universities in India and the University of Houston in the United States. The Institute was founded in 2012 with the singular mission of creating 10,000 product leaders in the country. Ever since, the organization has designed and delivered programs in collaboration with various institutes, universities, and corporates to the senior working professionals to help them make career transitions into product leadership. The Institute has built and developed a community of over 3,700 plus successful alumni leading the product, data, and design teams across the world. We're also knowledge partners for 250 plus organizations worldwide. You can find out more about the Institute and the programs offered on our website. You can find the link for the same in the chat window. And for those of you who've joined us via LinkedIn, you can check the comment section for the link. Today's session is on unleashing the power of metrics in product management. Once our speaker for today presents his insights, we'll open up for questions. You can post your questions on Zoom in the Q&A section. This session is also being streamed live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So viewers on any of the channels, please feel free to post your questions in the comment section and we will share your questions with the speaker. Do not miss out on this opportunity, guys. You can engage with our esteemed speaker with some good and intriguing questions. All right, I would like to kickstart this session by welcoming and introducing today's speaker, Mr. Alok Agrawal. Alok brings a wealth of experience in building fintech and payment systems honed through his roles at Gojek, Uber, and Microsoft. He is currently the Director of Product Management at Toast, where his leadership is defined by innovation with a commitment to excellence evident in his history of impacting millions of users. A very warm welcome to you, Alok. We're thrilled to have you with us here today.
Thank you so much, Herlene and IPL for welcoming to this masterclass. Super excited to be here today evening with all of you. We're going to talk about matrix and product management and how matrix can be used in product management today. Today's topic is pretty interesting and one of the very foundational principle of how success should be measured and defined in product management. The topic is also very subjective. If you talk to different product leaders, follow different books and blogs, you will see different perspectives on this. I'm not going to talk about what is the right or wrong perspective, but essentially share what has been my learning during my journey with the lens of how these metrics should be read, understood, and used in business decisioning when you are in the early stages of your product career. With that, I'll quickly share my screen. If you guys can confirm, you can see my screen or not.
Yes, your screen's visible, Alok.
Fantastic. All right. So today's topic, as Sahali mentioned, this is about power of metrics in product management. I'm Alok Agrawal, Director of Product for Toast Inc. Let me quickly walk you guys through my professional journey. I started my career at Microsoft back in 2010, got an opportunity to work on a lot of interesting products and teams like Windows, Azure, Visual Studio. Uh, those experiences really shaped my product thinking process and how I should be thinking customer first, how I should be using metrics in order to sort of deliver the best experiences to our customers and essentially deliver impact to the business. After that, I moved to Uber when Uber was starting their tech center in Hyderabad. I was their first product manager. I was essentially looking at a lot of analytics tools at Uber that helped assess profitability for Uber at that time, which was super, super essential. I worked there for a couple of years and then moved to Gojek. Gojek is a super app in Southeast Asia. They do rides, food delivery, fintech, and a bunch of other things in Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and other Southeast Asian countries. I was the head of the product for the identity product. We essentially offered accounts and identity solutions to users, customers, and merchants of Gojek. And currently at Toast, I lead the fintech and the payments team here in Bangalore. I am Toast India's product site lead as well as their first product manager here. All right. Uh, let's quickly jump to what we're going to discuss in session today. Since I got from Helene that they're going to be different set of people with varying degree of experiences in today's session, what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch at a very high level on what essentially product metrics are and what are the different key metrics that we use in product management. I'm sure you guys would have gone through some of this content in your classes as well, but I'll think of this as a quick refresher. And then we'll spend most of the time of today's session on understanding how we can use these metrics for decision making and what are the common pitfalls that we should avoid during the process of decision making. All right. So what essentially are product metrics? Um, Product metrics essentially helps us understand how users are interacting with our product. Think of them as signals that tell us if things are going in the right direction or not. Um, a simple trait of a product metric is you would find that they are measurable in some sort of a numeric component, either as a rate, either as a number or a time, or some kind of ratio. Uh, they're going to help us understand if users are doing what we expect them to do, and is that going to lead to a positive business outcome that we eventually expect from the product or not. Also understand simply tracking metrics will not necessarily explain why behind any of the changes on product metrics. For this reason, on a product matrix, it becomes super, super essential that we dig deeper to understand the customer behavior and experiences that are impacting these product metrics. And hence, in today's session, our focus will be more around understanding these customer behaviors as well as product metrics and using those two together. But why do product metrics essentially matters in product management? If you look at product management, it is all about making successful products. That's the whole purpose of this particular role. How do you ensure success of a product? And how we define success is just three key components. Is there a user adoption on the product? Are customers satisfied with your product? And using this product, are you able to create some kind of business impact or not? Anything else would more or less align on these three key principles. So if our goal is to essentially make a successful product or deliver a successful product, how do we know that we're successful or not? And this is where I think the matrix come in, because matrix will essentially help us to understand we are on the path of success or not. This will help us understand if our users or customers are really engaging with the products or not. We need to sort of understand these metrics better, link the right metrics to the business outcome, because the right metrics will let us form right hypothesis, adjust the variables to test the idea, and then eventually measure the results. Metrics will eventually have a great role or a very important role in decision making, or strategy formulation for our products. So before we go out on a journey of forming a new strategy, we have to define what exactly we expect as the outcome of that strategy or what exactly we're trying to achieve through that strategy. and define metrics at that time and measure that over a period of time. Um, those metrics could be input or output metric, leading or lagging indicators, and we'll talk about all those things in detail in course of next slides. So, how do you essentially link a metric to a business goal? Let's take an example. If you're go, let's say, take an example of Uber Rides app. If our goal is to measure the revenue on Uber's through Uber's Rides app, um, there could be multiple ways to do this. One is essentially towards the end of the month or end of the year, you take up all the revenue that came into the system, but it just takes a lot of time to measure that because you have to wait till the end of the cycle. It's essentially to measure that number. And that's where we call them as lagging indicators. But what if there could be some leading indicators like what's the number of signups? Are the number of signups increasing on Uber app? Where we could have an hypothesis where if there are more number of signups happening, if more number of users are coming on top of the funnel, most likely they're going to end up ordering rides, which will most likely end up increasing the revenue for the app. And hence, here user sign up can become a leading indicator. And hence, for any of the business goal, it is quite essential that we look at both leading and lagging indicators to ensure we are always on top of these metrics and always tracking the success very, very closely, rather than basically relying at something that you're gonna get to towards the end of the month, end of the quarter, or end of the year. What I would also suggest is avoid using vanity metrics to decide or gauge the business outcome and the success of this success of your product. What essentially are vanity metrics and how do you differentiate vanity metric from an actionable metric? We're going to talk about that in the later part of the slides. I'll take a pause here if there's any question. How do you arrive at Funny has a question at how do you arrive at the right data? So this is about first of all, you need to sort of decide what you essentially want to achieve through the product. Do you want to go towards a revenue goal? Do you want to essentially gather more and more users, more signups, or more engagement, right? Let's say if you were a Facebook app, would you care about at this stage of the product? Would you care about more users coming top of the funnel? Would you care about more engagement on the platform, like shares, etc., or would you care about more of the monetization around advertising revenue, etc.? And once you have sort of defined the end goal of the product or the feature that you're sort of building, you define the right metric to measure those. And once you sort of define the right metrics, you basically plug in right instrumentation at different places of the product and ensure those instrumentation are going into the right data tools or data sources so that you can essentially build right queries on top of it or right dashboards to measure that consistently. Second question from Vaishali: how is revenue goal different from getting more users or signups? It completely depends on what phase your product is in. Now, again, let's take example of Facebook. Imagine Facebook has just launched. It's in very early stages. In that early stage, I'm sure the product team wouldn't be thinking too much about revenue because at that time, they want that critical mass on the product, and hence ensuring more and more signups happen is the key goal for the team. And once let's just assume they have a critical mass, which could be a million user or 100 million user, they would want to ensure that there is a significant amount of engagement also onto the platform, because just users without any engagement is not a good indicator, because those users are eventually going to churn. And that's where you want to measure there's a good amount of engagement happening. People are posting stuff, liking stuff, sharing stuff, and whatnot. Once you have an engagement, once you have a lot of users on the platform who are highly engaged, at that time, probably it's a good time to start monetizing the platform, product, or a feature. And that's where you can have monetization metrics pulled in into your equation or analysis, and then that time you can essentially look at either how you monetize it, or if you're monetizing it, how well your monetization strategy is working on. Feel free to ask a follow-up if that doesn't answer your question. In the interest of time, I'll move to the next slide, which is again a quick refresher on what are the key metrics for the PMs. So I'm sure you would have seen this at many places or different product management books that you would have read through. Um, if you look at different blogs, you will essentially come at different categories or different types of metrics. None of them are wrong, to be very honest with you. The types of the categories that I have mentioned here is the simplest ones to understand and absorb, and that's the whole intent. But I'll towards the end of these like 5 points, I'll slowly diverge into other categories as well. So let's start with the first one, which is acquisition metric. So let's say you're a very new product, and you basically want to ensure that customers come on your product, and that's where acquisition metric becomes super critical, which helps us measure when someone first starts using the product. They have figured out, they have got to know about your product either through your online marketing campaigns or through some other channel, and they either download your app or go to your website or install your software on the computer and start to sign up. And that's where you count them as your acquired user or a customer, and that basically increases your acquisition count. Acquisition metric basically helps us understand what channels are working best to acquire your customers, because you eventually will have to use bunch of different acquisition channels. Many of these acquisition channels could be costly and paid as well, like say for example Facebook marketing, and hence you want to make sure that whatever you're spending on acquiring these customers is worth it or not. Some of the examples of acquisition metrics are number of signups or customer acquisition cost. CAC or customer acquisition cost is all about all the money that you spend in acquiring customer in a time period divided by number of customers that were acquired in that particular time period. So for example, if you end up spending 1000 rupees on all kind of marketing campaigns, and due to that, you were only able to get 10 customers sign up for your product, you essentially have 1000 divided by 10 as or 100 rupee as your customer acquisition cost per customer. So the reason we measure CAC or customer acquisition cost very closely is because you want to ensure a customer acquisition cost is significantly lower if you intend to scale your product to thousands, lakhs, and millions of customers. Because if your customer acquisition cost is considerably higher, imagine what would happen if you need to acquire millions of customers and from where that money is going to come in. Uh, Moving on, the second metric is activation metric. Now, your this particular user or customer has been acquired. They took the pain of finding your platform, finding your app, finding your website, and went through the pain of signing up onto your platform, right? Or on your app. Activation metric will help us understand how many and when these customers were able to discover the aha moment on your app. Now, let's take an example of Uber app again. After looking at some marketing advertisement from Uber, someone would download that app, someone would install that app on the platform on their mobile phone and sign up eventually. But when do they eventually order their first Uber ride? And that's because that is key. That is the eventual goal for the product, right? So that's how you measure activation. When your users or customers discovered your particular activation flow or a particular feature in your product. Now, there could be a bunch of different activation flows in your product, and that's totally okay. And then you can measure activation metric for or activation rate for each of these flows, depending upon what is your end goal through the product. The whole goal of activation metric is to help us understand if users are really able to drive value out of your product or not. And because if users are not able to see value in your product, they would eventually churn, they will eventually move away from your platform, and then either they will not come back, or you may have to spend acquisition cost again to bring them back to the platform, which is going to be very costly affair. The way we calculate activation rate, which is one of the activation metric, is you want to see how many users triggered a particular activation flow, which is, let's say, requesting an Uber ride, divided by all users who are acquired onto the platform. You can do this in a particular time period, let's say a month, to essentially see the activation rate for that particular month. I'll move on to the next metric, which is engagement metric. Now you have acquired the customer, you have also activated the customer. Now you want to see how engaged your customers is. Engagement essentially means how frequently your customers or your users use your product regularly. In case of Uber app, how many times a customer orders a ride or order food through the app? In case of, let's say, Facebook app, how many times a user posts something onto the platform, or how many times they either like a photo or put a comment on a photo or a post. So all of these could be a form of engagement metrics, and you want to measure that in order to see if customers are really engaged on your platform and they are able to see some value on the platform or not. They help us measure business growth. If users are not engaged, they would eventually get bored and move out to a competitor platform, or just move out of that particular ecosystem. Very common engagement metrics are DAU, MAU, also known as daily active users, monthly active users. Depending upon type of the product, you may want to measure engagement at a daily level or a monthly level. I want to call out, not every product, not every feature, not every flow should be measured at a daily level, because it may just not make sense. Like, say, for example, booking a flight, that like no one would be going to goibibo.com on a daily basis, but on a monthly basis, maybe yes. But if you're Facebook or Instagram, you probably would like to measure DAU activity there as well. Also, note that how you define active user is also critical. Just launching your app or a feature may not necessarily qualify as someone being active onto the platform or active on the feature. Um, so you want to make sure that they are doing some tangible metric that is delivering value to those users. Like putting a comment or adding a post, etc. That essentially measures true engagement rather than just a vanity there. I'll take a couple of questions here. This question from YouTube viewer: how do we pick the subset of our data for analysis that help us in driving these metrics? You don't pick data and then arrive at metric. You essentially form a business strategy, pick right metrics to assess success of that or outcome of that business strategy. And for those metrics, you basically decide what are the different data points that you would need in order to measure that metric effectively. At times, product managers make this mistake that they take such a complicated metric to define success of the product, which is really, really hard to measure. Or in order to measure that complicated metric, you may need 20 different data points. And I've seen in my career teams spending very valuable time in order to capture that data or build instrumentation of the product in order to measure that metric, rather than using that valuable time to ship important features or ship important value to their customers. So it's important that when you pick these metrics, they are very simple to measure, very simple to explain to your leadership, very simple to consistently keep a track of it. Um, and about picking the right data, once you have the right metric, you should be able to sort of define what are the different data points that you would essentially help you measure that particular metric over a period of time. Uh, Question from Karan, which tools do you use to calculate CAC? Um, I wouldn't necessarily go on tools during this particular presentation because tools is very team specific and organization specific. Uh, um, in a very simple terms, you can calculate CAC over any spreadsheet or an Excel sheet as well, as long as you have all the numbers of numerator and denominator. Numerator, there's all your spends, and denominator is number of customers that you acquired. I'm sure these numbers are easy to pull through some dashboards or some data queries in your systems. And once you have that number, you should be able to track CAC week over week, month over month, over a spreadsheet as well. You can use, however, use other tools, other product analytics tools to calculate that, like Amplitude as well, which will, as long as you're feeding the right data, it should help you measure CAC over a period of time. Question from Vivek, can you use the metrics to pivot your product strategy? If so, how? Uh, it actually depends. So if you have formulated a product strategy that you eventually are going towards your goal X, and based on the metrics, when you're measuring metrics over time, you realize that the metrics are not going in the right direction. You do essentially can do two things here. One, um, do new things, build new features, infuse more funds into the flow to ensure metrics are back on track where you want them to be. Or over a period of time, you realize that whatever you're doing is not going to help metric to move. Let's say, for example, acquiring customers. So let's say you're spending too much on Facebook marketing, but your acquisition metric is not moving in the right direction. That could be a good signal to maybe your Facebook marketing strategy is not working, and maybe your customers are not on that particular platform, and hence you need to rethink of your strategy on how you can acquire customers. So it's actually either or, depending upon on which direction your metrics are moving. All right. I'll move to the next slide. The fourth one is retention metrics. So number one, you have acquired customer. Number two, you have activated the customers. Number three, you have ensured they're engaged onto the platform as well. Number four, you want to ensure you're retaining them on a platform as well for a longer time. Retention metric essentially measures how many users return to your product over a certain period. Let's say if it is a social media app like Instagram, you may want to see if customers are coming back to your app every single day. If you are Indigo's booking website, Indigo Flights booking website, obviously you're not going to come there every single day to book a flight unless you travel a lot. And hence, the way you measure retention there is going to be very different than the way a social media app is going to measure it. You want to essentially assess how frequently you want your customers to keep coming back to your platform, and then keep a tap on it. A retention matrix is going to help you assess business growth, and also help you understand any unforeseen hiccups that can eventually happen. So while your customers may be engaged, if they don't see a lot of value in a longer run on your platform, they would eventually churn away. They will eventually leave your platform. And after leaving away for a couple of days, do they come back? If yes, then all good. But if they never come back, that's the problem. And that's where you have to sort of think of a newer strategy in order to improve your retention rate again. A couple of examples of this particular metric is retention rate, churn rate, or customer lifetime value. The way you measure churn rate is you basically take all the active users at the end of a time period, and you divide that by number of users that you had, or active users that you had at the start of the period. uh, you take a function of that and subtract that with one, and that's how you have an activation rate. Say, for example, on your platform, in the start of a time period, you had 100 users. Towards the end of the month, you had only 90 users using the product. So you basically have 1 minus 90 by 100. So your churn rate is 10% in this particular case. So 10% of customers have left the platform and not coming back at least in a month time. They may come back the next one, they may come back in a quarter. That something has to be analyzed separately. Last but not the least, and in fact, a very important metric is monetization metric. I deeply believe that eventually goal of every business is to make money. And that's why they are launching and releasing these products that can keep customers engaged or users engaged, so that eventually at some point in time, organizations, teams can monetize these features and products from these customers. So monetization metrics essentially help us understand how many users, or if users are really paying for your product or a feature. You can have a free product, but you can, however, have a small paid feature in your product. Classic example, YouTube, where YouTube can be used for free, but there's a YouTube paid subscription as well. That's actually monetized by YouTube. Why this metric is important? Because that eventually what matters to organizations, that eventually what matters to the sustainability of an organization and the business. If you're not making money, how else you're going to fund the product or the product development for a longer time? Couple of examples of monetization: monthly recurring revenue, MRR, or average revenue per user. Monthly recurring revenue is all about how, if you're a subscription product, like say for example Netflix, how much of revenue do you get at the end of the month every single month? That's basically your monthly recurring revenue. An average revenue, if you have, let's say, a lot of users on your platform, you may want to calculate ARPU or ARPU. That's basically calculated by taking the entire monthly revenue and dividing that by monthly active users. That's how you have an ARPU. Goal to eventually increase net revenue or total revenue for organization is by increasing ARPU for the product or the feature. So you can monetize by essentially doing two major things. Either you have more and more customers paying for your product, or two, you have same number of customers, but every customer is paying more for your product. Let's say, for example, every customer upgrading to a more premium plan where they're paying, instead of, let's say, 100 rupee a month, they are paying 200 rupee a month. So you can use either of the tactic to increase the overall revenue through the product. I'll take a pause here to see if there are any more questions. Question from Bhanu: Is user experience plays the most important role in customer retention or any other feature? Yes, user experience does play an important role in customer retention, but it will eventually come down to if users see sustainable value in the product or not. Let's say you design the world's best user experience product, but if it doesn't deliver any value to your user or customer, they would eventually churn away, right? So the higher focus should be on ensuring there's a very clear value proposition on the product. And once you have a value proposition, you need to ensure you're delivering that value proposition through a great user experience, so that customers are consistently engaged and retained on the platform, and are not moving away to a competitive product where they may find the similar value with a better experience. So value and experience both are essentially critical here. All right. As I said in the start of when I was explaining these metrics, there are a lot of different categories of metrics. These five are what I feel is more popular ones, but there are other metrics that a product manager should keep a track on. Um, one of them is health metric. Now, health metric will help you ensure or measure if your services, the product services, are healthier or not. Let's say if you are offering a website to your users or customers, if the page load time is too high, it takes 15 seconds to load the home page. Your customers, doesn't matter how good value your product delivers, your customers will eventually churn away if there's a better offering or better competitor available in the market. Um, if your website or an app throws too many errors while doing performing a particular action, your customers will eventually churn away. If there's a data loss between the app and your servers, your customers or users will eventually churn away. So you have to measure these health metrics and keep a tap on it and very, very closely, and then ensure you discuss this with your engineering counterpart. I've seen a lot of product managers making this mistake where they think measuring or keeping a tap on health metric is just job of their engineering counterpart or engineering manager, which I believe is totally incorrect. Health metrics are essential and a very important part of your overall product success. And hence, when you're tracking and presenting your North Star matrix and your other input and output metrics, make sure you are talking about those health metrics and keeping a tap on it if they are not becoming red or borderline red. Because once they become red or bad, it can take significant amount of time and money for your team to actually recover that back. And in that time frame, you may end up losing your customers who may never come back. So, and hence keeping a tap on health metrics is super, super important. The other kind of metrics that you may also hear about is ecosystem metric, outcome metric, and satisfaction metric. I'll not go too deep into this today. Some of the satisfaction metrics are Net Promoter Score, NPS, customer feedback and reviews that you see on different forums, as well as the support ticket resolution time or number of support tickets itself. Keeping on, like, if you have too many support tickets coming in, there's certainly some problem in your product that you should be aware of and should be looking into. If your support ticket take, let's say, a month time to, on an average, take a month time to resolve, then obviously you're frustrating your customers. If your customers are posting really bad review about your app on Play Store and App Store, that's a huge signal to worry about. So these are the different things you should also keep a track on. I'm not saying these are less important. This is as important as any other metric that we discussed today. Uh, there's another question. How do we measure monetization metric for physical product? I'm not sure what physical product. I mean, maybe Amazon Alexa speakers or maybe a television, if that's what they mean. You can there also measure the revenue that you're generating from these products, the total sales that's happening, etc. And that's how you can continue to measure. Monetization metric is all about the dollars coming in, and the dollars could be recurring in case of some of the digital subscription based product, or it could be one time as well, like in case of physical products. I'm not saying subscriptions are not possible in physical products. They are very much, but that's just a different monetization strategy. So you eventually want to measure the total dollars or total money that's coming in by selling your products and keeping a track at it. Do ask a follow-up if I didn't answer your question correctly. Okay. There are a couple of Q&As as well. Is it okay if I take some of these Q&As towards the end of the session? I think these are over a lot of different slides. So in the interest of time, let's move on to the next set of slides. I will ensure that we spend good 40 minutes or more on Q&As, because I know there could be a bunch of questions on matrix and how do we effectively use this matrix on for product strategy and planning. All right. Uh, Very, very important. How do we use matrix for decision making? Um, it's essentially starts with aligning matrix with product goals. You don't define matrix first and then think about business goal or product goal later. You think of a product goal first and then align some of the matrix to those product goals. So in the cycle that you see on the screen right now, you first formulate your product strategy, what you want to do. Based on that product strategy, you define what are the metrics that you want to measure. Maybe some of the measurement for those metrics is already available in the product, if the product is an existing product, or you may want to build the system in place. You may want to build instrumentation in place if it's a whole new product. So you want to ensure that you have metrics very clearly defined before launching a product, launching a feature. Make sure the instrumentation is in the right place, and your team has an ability to pull that data and present in some kind of dashboard so that you can measure it consistently. Once you have a product strategy, once you have defined the right matrix and have right instrumentation in the place, you need to sort of identify the right leverage point. Now, when you see your matrix moving in the right, in a particular direction, you would know what is the one particular metric that you can double down on, or you can probably launch new features there in order to create leverage for your product. The leverage could be getting more customers. Let's say when you launch your app, and your strategy was to acquire a bunch of new customers, bunch of new signups, and you launched Facebook marketing strategy as well as ads on newspapers. You eventually see that there's more or higher conversion through Facebook ads than the newspaper ads. Then you basically want to leverage that and double down on that particular part. In order to double down, you may want to eventually conduct some A/B experiments. So if you have identified a leverage point that through marketing campaigns, more customers eventually come in, you want to do bunch of different experiments or A/B experiments to see how you can have the maximum leverage for your product or for your outcome. And through that, once you have designed that experiment, and designed that experiment may require releasing a feature or tweaking your measurement flow, depending upon what kind of feature, what kind of experiment we are talking about here. Once you have your experiment rolled out, you need to constantly measure the outcome of this experiment. Uh, Constantly measuring the outcome, analyzing the metric before and after the experiment is critical. Measuring the outcome on a week-on-week basis, day-on-day basis is critical, because that will help you understand if you're really improving or not. If you just have the number that's available after your experiment is live, but you don't have a number from before the experiment, how would you know if you really improved or not? And that's where I think it's critical to measure these metrics before and after, and consistently week on week and month on month as well. And once you have measured the outcome, you basically take some of the learnings from that experiment and integrate that further into the product strategy to evolve your strategy and come up with newer strategies or newer tweaking to your strategy to keep repeating that cycle again and again. And that's how it will essentially help you evolve your product strategy for eventual success of your product or a feature. What I've seen in my career, whatever strategy you start with, most likely will not yield in a successful outcome in the first iteration. If it did yield in a successful outcome in the first iteration itself, most likely the problem statement was very simple, or the success was very well defined for you. You had a very clear market for your product or a feature, and everyone was just dying for your product. But in an ideal world, typically that does not happen. And hence, when you come up with a strategy to either acquire new customers, increase the engagement, or monetize your product, you may have to go through multiple cycles to eventually arrive at your hero strategy that will give you desired results. And let me call this out with bold and underlined letters that even if that strategy may be working right now for you, eventually after maybe a year or two, that strategy will stop working at some point in time. And at that time, you will have to think of a newer strategy by essentially repeating the same cycle. Uh, So start with setting very, very clear goal, what you want, define your key outcome matrix, and then continuously monitor the entire process. And that's the process. But then the question comes in, how do we define or how do we find the right metric for the process? Define the right strategy. We know maybe we want to make more money through the product, maybe we want to have more customers, but how do we pick the right matrix for this? Um, it comes down to really understanding what you want from the product. If you're trying to do everything, most likely you'll end up reaching nowhere. So in understand what phase or what life cycle your product is in, and based on that life cycle, very clearly define the goals, and based on the goal, define a metric. If you are a net new product in a market, maybe where you're trying to do a category creation, um, thinking of a monetization strategy or thinking that you may be able to monetize it right away may not be a right thinking process. And hence, at that time, you may want to focus on essentially testing your idea itself, and essentially acquiring customers into that product itself. So you have to align your strategy to your product life cycle and then define metric. You also have to understand the user behavior to come up with some of the metrics. Um, you need to sort of understand how your products and how your customers or users interact with the product, and why do they interact with the product. If there's a lack of understanding in this, why they used your product and how they use your product, you may always end up measuring an incorrect metric. So while formulating the strategy, or while actually thinking of a product itself, very clearly have a very clear understanding of why this product should exist in the first place. Um, Eventually, once you see some success for the product, do prioritize business impact. Start thinking about the revenue generation opportunities and revenue generation metrics to keep the product and the business sustainable. Um, Also, for ensuring the sustainability of the product, never ever ever forget about customer satisfaction metrics, NPS, CSAT, etc. Because even if you have a hero product with a great monetization strategy, really affordable pricing, if your customers are frustrated with your product, they will most likely not come back. And lastly, just iterate. Um, Most of the time it's hard to get this right the first time. You eventually get good at it with more and more experience. But even if you're not right the first time, learn from the outcome and then iterate. Remember, learning from the outcome is essential. Don't just blindly keep changing strategy in every iteration to see uh, what strategy may just blindly work for you. I don't think that's the right way to do it, because you will end up burning a lot of cycles and end up burning a lot of money through that process. So if you deployed one particular product strategy and then were measuring certain metrics and you didn't get the desired outcome, ask yourself and the team this question, why this would have not worked out, and make sure you take those learnings and feed that into your strategy again, rather than just starting fresh, throwing all away, throwing all the learning from the previous iteration, which may not be good. Okay. All right. I'll move on to the next slide here. Let's understand what input and output metrics are. Now, let's take an example. If you are, let's say, an Uber app, your eventual goal is to sort of make more revenue through the app. What are the different things that you can do to make more revenue? Most of the time, your direct action may not necessarily result in getting revenue for the product. Or taking another example, let's say if your goal is to find a new job, um, that's your end goal. Uh, um, but there's nothing in your control necessary that you can do to eventually land a job. What is in your control here is some of the input metrics that will eventually formulate an output metric of finding a job. So let's say, how do you measure you are able to find a job? Let's consider there's an output metric for it, which is you get at least 2 confirmed job offers. So if you get a 2 confirmed job offers, you would be able to conclude that you have found a job. But how do you land at 2 confirmed job offers? For that, maybe you have to basically break this down into bunch of a couple of different input metrics. One could be you apply to X number of companies, or you through your network you try to land X number of interviews, or maybe you do Y number of mock interviews with your friends and your mentors. So these are the things that are in your control. These are the things that you can actually try to do yourself that can eventually move the output metric in the right direction and can help you meet the business goal. So input metric essentially focuses on the resources and efforts invested in product development. Like the things that your team are eventually going to do. But the output metric measures the outcome or the combined outcome and the result generated by all these ideas. So you can have 5 to 7 different teams trying to do a bunch of different features or capabilities to your product. And then if they all of them together will probably help in generating a right outcome or generating a revenue for your product. Input metrics essentially act as a leading indicator uh, um, to measure if you're going in the right direction or not. Say, for example, if I'm measuring revenue, you get to know if you really got all that revenue or not by end of the month or end of the quarter, which is pretty late because by then you would have lost a lot of precious time that you could have used to re-strategize or change your strategy if it's not working in the right direction. And hence, you need some of the leading indicators like your channel conversion ratio or your sign up funnel, etc., to see if more and more users are coming onto your platform or not, or maybe looking at engagement, or maybe looking at activation of some of your features to see if top of the funnel is really improving or not, which can eventually generate enough revenue for your product. So input metric essentially help in monitoring the efficiency and allocation of the resources. Output metric essentially help us provide insight into the success and effectiveness of the product. So that's critical to understand. Here's the quick and small definition. I'll just pause here for 10 seconds or 20 seconds for you guys to read through it. All right. Um, Remember this while you are sort of formulating a strategy for your product. You have to choose a input metric that you can control and make it actionable. Remember, input metrics are also actionable. Making your startup $1 million or a unicorn is not very actionable in your hands. What you do to reach that stage is probably actionable. And hence, what you should do is you need to sort of focus on some of these input metrics and channelize your energies towards this input metrics in order to ensure you eventually achieve your output metric. Your output metric should actually be based on the results that you eventually want to achieve. So input metrics is more about what you want to do and what you can have actionable, and output metric is all about what you eventually want to achieve. The reason we shouldn't be setting goals or just setting the output metric, because this will end up demotivating your team. In a shorter cycle, it's very hard to measure output metric, and hence the teams will eventually feel that the outcome is not in their control, which will lead to a lot of dissatisfaction. Or if the outcome does not come in their favor after a month or a quarter or a year, they will feel very, very demotivated. And hence, there should be very clear input output metric map in your product strategy. And what you should be measuring at your team level is more of these input metrics at a more regular level. And what you should be presenting to your leadership in this monthly reviews and whatnot is the movement on the output metric, and why do you think the output metric moved? Because one of your particular input metric might have contributed to it. Let's take another example. So in this particular chart, what I'm trying to show is you can have a bunch of input metrics that can connect to an output metric. And then for each input metric, your team can eventually take one or bunch of different initiatives. Say, for example, if we want to increase revenue through a product, your product growth team can take a metric of getting more signups on the product. Your marketing team can take an input metric of having right marketing spends. Your customer support team can have a metric on having lower ticket resolution time, and eventually all of this together can ensure you are reaching to some of the output metric. Building this relationship between input and output metric is also critical, and you'll not be able to reach a perfect map in the first iteration itself. You will eventually realize that you would miss some of the input metrics that are key to a movement on an output metric. And once you go through multiple cycles, you will eventually be able to reach at that, and which is completely fine in my opinion. Okay, let's take another example. Spotify. Let's assume the output metric for this particular team, that what they want to achieve is they want to increase the time spent listening to the music onto the platform. That's their goal. As long as people spend more time listening to the music, they should be happy. And please note, this output metric could be connected to some other output metric. Output metric need not be just revenue or the end metric. This output metric here could be acting as an input metric for something else. But here in this particular case, in order to increase time spent, they have identified two different input metrics. One is bringing users back more and more often onto the platform, and second one, increasing time spent per session. And the way these two teams are looking at it, one particular team that's trying to bring more users back onto the platform, they're thinking probably if we give more artist notifications onto the app, users would come back. If I see my favorite artist song getting added to Spotify, maybe I'll just come back to the app. Or if I get a recommendation about this new great song that's going top charts, if I see that recommendation or a notification, maybe I'll come back. So that's one. In order to increase more time per session, the other team may come up with a strategy of creating new playlist. If there's playlist, there's going to be more engagement onto the platform, onto the app. And because of more engagement, I'll end up spending more and more time. Or maybe I'll build a newer feature to discover new songs altogether based on the kind of song that I'm listening to. So if I like a particular song and somehow through some kind of artificial intelligence, Spotify can detect, oh, you like song A, I'm sure most likely you're gonna like the song B that I'm gonna recommend to you. And if that happens, there's chance that I'll go into the cycle of listening to 10 songs instead of just one, because song after song was just those which I really, really like. And if I was probably thinking I'll spend a minute or two on the platform, but I ended up spending good 1 hour there. So through these strategies, essentially, we this teams move this two input matrix, which eventually help them move an output metric for the team. This question from Vivek: how is attribution done for input metrics? Are regression-based methods used? Uh, so it'll come down to let's say an organization or a larger product team eventually decides on a product goal or an output metric. um, they're going to be bunch of sub teams defined within or created within the larger product org, and each sub product team may have their own defined responsibilities, and based on those defined responsibilities they would come up with their own strategies or ideas on how they can contribute to that output metric in their own ways. Now, this particular thing can be done both bottoms up, where teams suggesting that, hey, here are the things that we can do in order to move that output metric, or it can come top down as well, where you may hear from your top leadership that, hey, these 5 teams, you should probably try this 10 different things together, which will help us move this particular output metric. So it can be either of the two. As I said, the process is more iterative. For a very complex problem, most likely you may not be able to hit this accurately the very first time. Say, for example, again in the Spotify example, what if even after sending newer artist notifications, the users are not coming back because you realize that 95% of Spotify users keep their notifications disabled because Spotify was sending too many notifications. So the other problem that you may have to solve is having more useful notifications in the place, which will eventually help um, 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 move the traffic or move the metric through newer notifications. So you have to go through a couple of cycles in order to understand what's working, what's not working. All right. What are the common mistakes that one should avoid while identifying these key metrics to measure the business outcome? We talked about a bunch of different metrics. We talked about input output metrics, leading and lagging indicators. But then one common mistake that I very often see teams doing is relying on vanity metrics versus actionable metrics. Vanity metrics are more feel good metric, which on which you want to just boast, but they don't necessarily help us make better decision. Say, for example, number of app downloads. You could get humongous amount of downloads, but it not necessarily help in uh, moving the business in the right direction, because it doesn't really tell you if your users are liking your app or not. It doesn't, number of app downloads also doesn't tell you if you were running a promotion, a paid promotion in order to get these downloads. So just number of app downloads is not a great metric to track. Instead, you may want to track what's the active app users, like how many people are consistently active on your platform or on your app or feature. So that essentially shows that customers or your users are actually getting value out of your product. um, Another one, for products where you want to, like marketing teams often make this mistake, where They talk about number of email subscribers they have. If you have a newsletter kind of product, number of email subscribers. It doesn't necessarily tell the teams if they have a successful product, or if your customers or your users are really getting value out of your emails. Because what if these emails are getting to their spam folders? What you instead want to measure is the CTA click-throughs on those emails. Are people really opening the app? Are opening that email? Are people really clicking on one of the CTA on your email or not? That that essentially will help you understand if there's an engagement onto your emails or not. Simply boasting number of social media followers. Again, not a great metric. If I have a millions followers on social media, doesn't necessarily mean million people are engaged with me. Uh, how many of those followers are constantly engaged with me? Something I should measure. Or on a apps Instagram page, we need to see if we are running a campaign. What's the campaign conversion rate? Even after having a million followers, if none of the customers or users are coming on or coming on to campaign, there's no use of having a million social media followers. And hence, when we are defining metrics to measure business outcome, uh, see if you are defining a vanity metric or an actionable metric. Um, a very simple tactic to see if your metric is a vanity metric or not. See if your metric is actually driving any action or outcome. If it is not driving any action or outcome, most likely it is a vanity metric. And it comes by practice. But this is a question that every product manager should keep on asking themselves. Am I simply relying on a vanity metric in order to sort of get a good feel about the success of the product? Second, a lot of early stage product managers make this mistake. They come up with this very complicated product strategy, very complicated matrix structure, in order to sort of define and measure success. But quite often, what they forget about is the power of qualitative inputs. Um, in especially in the early stage, and this applies to all the stages of the product, but especially in the early stages, a most simplistic way to understand if your customers love your product or not is by simply asking them one single question. Do you like the product? And put a small comment box. Tell us why you like the product, or tell us why you don't like the product. And religiously, meticulously, every single morning, go through all the feedback, all the comments that's coming in. These comments could be coming through your data store, could be coming on some kind of dashboard. You can build an integration through your spreadsheet where these comments can be pulled on a spreadsheet. Like, the how you're going to do this is completely dependent on the technology stack that you guys have. But especially in the early stages of the product, make sure you're reading each and every comment. If it is in a certain quantity, if it's a million comments every single day, obviously it's almost impossible to read through those, unless you apply some kind of AI tooling on top of it. But going through these comments itself give you immense amount of insight into what's going right and what's going wrong with the product. No amount of matrix tracking or instrumentation is going to give you insights about how customers are using your product more than simple qualitative feedback. Uh, Second, and we third one, we touched on this one, not tracking changes over time. I've seen product managers coming back after releasing an experiment saying, hey, we see sign up rate being 40% now. And when I ask this question, what was the rate before? They often do not have an idea or an accurate idea about it. So it's very, very important that you measure changes over time, not just before launching a feature, after launching a feature, but consistently week on week and month on month after launching a feature as well, to see if there's if the metric is going in the right direction or not. And whenever you see it's going off trend, the trend that you didn't expect, make sure you are doing something about it. Make sure you're launching a newer experiment, making adding a newer feature, adding a newer instrumentation in order to track these things. Also, there's a lot of historical context around why certain metric work in a certain way. So before you go on a journey of tracking a particular metric, if there's a historical context, do look at those contexts, do gather enough information about that context. Super critical. It will actually save you and your team a lot of time. Rather than discovering that context yourself after a couple of weeks or months of failure, if that information is readily available in that organization, dig deeper into that. Um, Lastly, I wanted to talk about building a matrix culture. I, I feel product managers often feel that measuring metrics is only their responsibility, and when teams have that kind of culture, they often, like product managers, I've seen those teams often struggle with defining the right metric and having the right data to actually assess the outcome of that metric. What you need to do is you need to build a matrix culture in your team. So your product, engineering, design, research, sales, marketing, everyone needs to be obsessed about these metrics. Everyone should be tracking these metrics. Everyone should be questioning each other on why a certain metric went up or went down. Just don't clap and be happy when the metric went up. You need to have a very reasonable reasons for why metric went up, because then you want to use those reasons and double down on that on future. And when the metric go down, you want to dig deeper into that so that you understand those reasons and avoid making that mistake again in the future. Make sure you do regular reviews of these metrics, dashboards, whatever you have, with the broader team, and go deep into this. Don't think in order to do this regular reviews or deep dives, you need a really fancy, well-designed dashboard. That's absolutely not true. You can have these metrics on a very simple spreadsheet or on a query as well. As long as you are able to communicate the metric trend over a period of time to your audience or to your team members, you should be good. If your team does not or your company does not have a capability or the ability to build really nice looking dashboards, that's completely okay. Lastly, encourage a very data driven mindset in the team. We should absolutely avoid where we're just shooting in the dark and having a culture where, hey, let's try this because this has worked for some other company. If something has worked for some other company or some other product, it may not necessarily work for you. So you need to have very reasonable reasons for why you're trying something, because in order to build any feature, in order to build any instrumentation, it takes away valuable time from the team, which is basically money. So you have to be super sure of before starting anything. What I'm not recommending here is thinking too much and being less agile or slow in making those decisions. What I'm essentially recommending is to just don't shoot in the dark. Uh, Lastly, on this particular slide, I have some books and articles that I suggest you guys should read. The three books are absolutely amazing. You should read those. You should be able to find that on books marketplaces as well. And some of these three articles that are available, if you Google about them, you should be able to find those articles on internet. With that, I am towards the end of my presentation. Feel free to ask any question. I'll go through There are a couple of questions on the Q&A section of the app. I'll go through those questions. Harleen, if you can post any other questions from streaming platforms, and if folks have the ability to come online and ask that question, that'll be great.
Yes, all right.
I'll start with the first one on the Q&A section itself. By Anonymous, can you please elaborate on vanity metrics with B2B product? Um, Metrics would again be even in a B2B product. It could be same as app downloads or page visits. Page visit is quite, I have seen this quite often in some of the B2B product. I've seen people saying, I have million users coming to my homepage every single day. But that does not necessarily mean anything, in my opinion. So what you need to sort of be sure of, are these users eventually converting and doing a tangible action on your product or not? So that's what you should eventually um, aspire to measure. Um, Goal of a B2B product would be to monetize the capabilities on the product, and hence you need to see the metrics that you're measuring, are they sort of eventually feeding into some kind of monetization metric for your product or not? If they're not, that's not good to measure. And also another way, as I said during that vanity metric slide, if the metric is not actionable, most likely it is a vanity metric. Next question from anonymous attendee. In case of Uber, how many users the booking ride monthly are classified as MAU or activation rate? It depends. So if there's a net new user onto the platform and they are trying to book ride for the first time in their journey, that will be considered as an activation rate. And the users who are doing this every single month, that's MAU. The user who has just activated and booked a ride will also be classified into monthly active user as well for rides. But in monthly active user, it's a more superset metric where you have both newly activated users as well as the previously activated users. With an activation rate, you basically try to sort of measure only the net new users. What you want to ensure is your MAU and your activation rate is constantly increasing if you're working on a product that you want to scale to a pretty large audience. Question from Vikas. With respect to instrumentation, what would be factors to build versus buy the instrumentation? Because if your question is more around instrumentation tool, I think it depends on the company. Most of the instrumentation tools out there, particularly for app or a website instrumentation, offer great abilities like Google Analytics, Amplitude, Clever Tap, and a bunch of like dozens of other tools as well. If you aim to build those internally, you can, but it's reasonably hard and expensive to build those capabilities on a short term within the organization, right? So it'll come down to what's your organization's philosophy around build versus buy, and that has to be taken into consideration versus the blanket build versus buy strategy for instrumentation. Since this tool are integrated with a bunch of other products and bunch of other tools, they eventually have a lot more capabilities and accuracy and ability to churn lot more data than what one team can build internally in a shorter period of time. But if your team or a company seem to have unlimited capital, why not take a shot at it? I absolutely suggest that. But now, if your question is more around integrating instrumentation, I think that's where you have to do this yourself in your code. You have to define right points in your application, right points in your code when the instrumentation is pushed into either a homegrown instrumentation tool or an external tool. So that's something you will have to do yourself. Next question from anonymous attendee. Please share examples of metric and B2B products in service industry, IT industry. Again, the 5 categories that I talk about apply to any of the products like B2B, B2C as well. I don't see a reason why they would not. Um, um, for an IT industry, it would depend on a kind of product, right? So while most of the metrics apply to every product, you have to consider what's the end goal for your product and then choose the right metric rather than blindly applying those five metric groups to every product that you're working on. So as we like saw in that slide of defining right matrix, you have to go back to the right product strategy, what you're trying to achieve, and then see how you can measure that. Um, um, and in the case, if you think your particular metric is outside that five category, then why not? It should be completely okay. Next question, is there a direct metric to evaluate UX? There are a lot of qualitative ways to measure UX. Like you can run a user research and ask your users to essentially go through your experience and rate it out of 5 or out of 10. That's a qualitative way of measuring UX. A quantitative way of measuring UX could be you can see the drop-offs at every stage of your flow. So let's say on your flow, you have five different stages. You want to see what's the drop-off at every stage. And based on the drop-off, you can build hypotheses on why a drop-off is happening. Is that because of bad UX? Is that because of bad health of the app, latency, or just sheer lack of value to the product? So you'll have to sort of build hypotheses on that. But a quicker, simpler way is to do this, do a quick user research on and doing a qualitative way of doing this. Next question from anonymous attendee. Is there any relationship between an OKR and a product matrix? Are both same or how both are different? They are connected and yet they are different. Um, OKRs are objective and key results. Objectives is all about the end goal that you want to achieve. Key results are the ways you're going to measure if you have achieved that outcome or not, right? So, or you have reached that objective or not. And you're going to use your bunch of product metrics to assess the success of a key result. Let's say, for example, your objective is to increase the product revenue by 10%. For that, if your goal is to increase signups by 20%, that could be your key results. And then if you're increasing your sign up by 20% or not, there could be a bunch of different product metrics. Uh, Acquisition rate is obviously one of the metric, but there could be a bunch of other input metrics that could be leading to sign up rate key result. Next question from anonymous attendee. Please share best practice for metric periodic review. Should be triggered based on every month or quarter. The rule of thumb that I typically follow for every feature. Now, this is for a feature, not necessarily for a product. So every time you release a new feature, and it can, however, apply to product as well. After you release a product or a feature, for the first week, measure it on a daily basis. For next 2 to 3 weeks, make sure you're measuring this at a weekly level. And once the metrics have stabilized after a month, make sure you are measuring this every bi-weekly or monthly. When you just released, you have to make sure you're measuring this every day or maybe multiple times a day to see if there is any issue with your feature. If there's a bug out there, and then because of that, people like your customers are dropping off. So you want to assess that quickly. You want to fix that quickly, and hence measuring that multiple times in a day or every single day is important. But after a couple of days, the matrix will start stabilizing, and that's where you move to a weekly, bi-weekly, and a monthly stage. The more mature your product or a feature is, you can have more delayed reviews, but don't go usually to a quarter, at least at a team level. You can, however, have a review with leadership at a quarter level, but at a product team level, you should Worst case, do at a monthly level, because quarter is just too late, in my opinion, to fix something that is broken. I'll go through the comments. Can you share the slides? Yes, I'll share slides with Helene and team, and they can share the slides with you guys. Helene, a question from the viewer: how do we break down matrix on retention and monetization for physical products where we may not be able to track the end customer, a toy? Interesting. So in case of a physical product like a toy, you may not necessarily be able to gauge if customers are constantly using that product or not, and if there's higher engagement or not. But what you can certainly measure if there's monetization happening if you're selling more toys. If you're selling more toys, most likely a toy of a particular kind, most likely that toy is popular. Most likely that toy is desired by its users. Most likely that toy brings a lot of value and joy to your users, and that's how you can like build this hypothesis and come to conclusion. If your users if a same user is coming back again and again buying the same toy, it could also mean that while your toy is great, maybe it just breaks really soon, and that's why they have to just replace it with a newer version. And if that's the case, a customer may not essentially buy that toy third or fourth time, so you may have to keep a track at that as well. So looking at your customer profiles who is buying that, and keeping a track of sales overall can help you understand if you're going in the right direction or not. Question from Supreet. Alok, is engagement metric and retention metric go hand in hand? That is a good engagement rate means the profitability probability of retention is more and vice versa. Um, Not necessarily. So engagement would help you essentially understand a set of users who are engaged on the product now. But retention will essentially tell you if the same set of users used your product again or not. So in order to have very high engagement rate, what you can have is you can keep on feeding more and more customers on top of the funnel. You can keep having more signups, and this sign up when new customers sign up, they will end up having higher engagement on in the start most likely, but they will eventually churn away, and your retention will be lower. So what you want to ensure is while there's a higher engagement, the same cohort of customers also are retained on the platform, so that you don't have to constantly rely on newer acquisition, because newer acquisition will eventually be either expensive or impossible, because increasing total addressable market or TAM beyond a certain point is incredibly hard. Next question from Siddhant Bhardwaj. How can we connect with you? Find me on LinkedIn, Alok Agrawal. I work for Toast. My handle is I am Alok Agrawal. I as an ice cream. M as in Malaysia, Alok Agrawal. And find me on LinkedIn. Let's connect. Harin, is there any other question that I might have missed?
Yes, we have a question from LinkedIn where they've asked the difference between a product manager versus a product owner, and they themselves are like they're not sure if this is the right question to ask, but they're wondering what the difference between a product manager and a product owner is.
Sure. Great question, and there's no clear-cut definition of it. A lot of organizations use this interchangeably, unfortunately. Product manager's responsibility is to sort of ensure um, eventual success of a product. They are more matrix focused, outcome focused. Their job not necessarily be running daily sprints, being the agile coach for the team, etc. Whereas the product owner's responsibility also include running the daily sprints, doing a product planning, for the team. So the role, however, changes based on your seniority and the level. Um, but unfortunately, there's no very clear-cut definition out there in the industry, in my experience.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we have one final question in the Q&A. That is, can you share any case study where metrics has resulted in pivoting product strategy?
Certainly, I mean, there's so many. I'll share one example. At Uber, Uber was hyper rides focused. They never wanted to start eat Uber Eats business. Uber Eats used to be a food delivery business here in India as well, but Uber exited that business, I think, back in 2020. So Uber didn't want to be in this business for obvious reasons. It was very capital intensive, but a small team went out to do an experiment and see if this is really worth it or not. So a group of 10 or 12 people went out and did a very small MVP. And I don't think we have time to go into the details of MVP, but they went through the MVP and really proved that this is something that's worth doing for Uber because there was tangible revenue out there. And then Uber slowly, eventually started investing in this idea. And this is today where during the pandemic time, when all the ride business was completely shut down, Uber Eat business was generating all the revenue for the company and keeping the company live at that time. So what may feel like not a good thing to do initially, if you do experiments, measure that closely, report it to right people, you can pivot the product strategy. Now, this is an example of introducing a newer product. There are various examples on pricing strategy. A lot of companies have changed their pricing strategy as well, based on some of the metrics that they were measuring.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Alok. Just one second. I will. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you for delivering a brilliant session, and you provided some really great and thought-provoking insights. We've immensely enjoyed having you with us, and it has been a complete pleasure. Please accept the certificate of appreciation from the Institute. The QR code on the certificate will actually take you to a dedicated Hall of Fame page created for you, and the recording of this session will also be available on that page. We would appreciate you sharing it with your network. We will also be sharing the recording of this session on our YouTube channel. Thank you, Alok, for that wonderful session.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you. And to all our attendees, we've got something cool that we know you will love. It's our newsletter, which is called the Product Pulse. It's a treasure trove of product management, strategy, and leadership tips and insights. You can subscribe to stay updated with the product community. You can find a link for the same in the chat window on Zoom. We also host various knowledge sharing events. You can keep up to date with them with the link in the chat. Our next masterclass is taking place on the 2nd of March, which is on the topic of how to build AI driven products. Thank you once again for joining and giving us your time of the day. I would request you to go ahead and scan the QR codes on the screen and leave any reviews, feedback, or queries. I'll wait here for a few seconds so that you have time to scan the QR code. Okay, great. I think that should be great. Thank you all once again. Thank you, Alok. Thank you to all our attendees. I'm sure all our attendees have had a fruitful time at today's session, and I look forward to hosting you all in the future again. On that note, I'll end today's session. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the evening.